Hello, everybody. Lori Swanson here, your host for the weekly live broadcast Career Alchemy, and also the CEO of Inspire Tech, a career coaching firm for women in and around technology, mid to late career, who are at a career crossroads or uh, just considering a career pivot and looking for support, ideas, inspiration, and good positive energy in the process. Those are the people that love working with me and that I love working with. But today, if you've come to these live sessions before, you might be noticing something a little different, my background. So I want to invite you to an event on May 8th. This is a free webinar that I'm hosting with two amazing women, Gail Holmberg and Mary Cook. And what we're talking about is beyond the 9 to 5. So if you follow the QR code over my shoulder, that will take you to the registration link. Like I said, it's free. And what we're going to be discussing is there's a point in everyone's career, and it doesn't mean that you're necessarily approaching retirement, or as one of my clients said, she's approaching pre-retirement and considering different ways of work. She's considering moving out of the corporate chaos and corporate 9 to 5 and looking for different ways to share her wisdom and also to create more flexibility around her work, the work she does, who she does it with, all of those things. And so Mary Cook is a leader with Korn Ferry, and she will be talking to us about considering interim work. Gail Holmberg recently retired herself, but for a number of years did fractional work and helped build the fractional practice at Fortium Partners. And we were going to be talking about fractional work and interim work and consulting advisory work and just plain old contracts. And what does all of that mean? And how do you prepare yourself, your resume, your pocketbook for this potential option for yourself at some point in your career? So I just wanted to, first of all, put out that invitation. So please join me at the event on Friday, May 8th, noon Central Time. Register here and you'll receive the Zoom details. And I look forward to seeing everyone there and pass it on to all the women you know who are looking to be more empowered and have more agency over their work. This conversation is for you. And now let's get to our topic of the day. So today, what I wanted to discuss with you is what I was calling when saying no can cause career fallout, or maybe even better, will it cause career fallout? So this particular story comes from two, I don't know why I keep getting surprised when synchronicities happen, but two events happening in the same day that were so closely connected that I had to write about them. So in the morning, I'm working with a client and she's talking about this. She had said yes to somebody to help them out on a project. And now she was feeling very resentful, overwhelmed by her own workload, and angry that she had said yes to this other person without, it isn't that she didn't have a lot of thought around it, but the one and only thought that she really had was, if I say no to this person, there could be career like blowback. And I think that could be real, right? She wasn't excited about the work. She wasn't even just willing to help this person out. She was just afraid that if she said no, that there would be this blowback that could hurt not only her future relationship with this person, but also career advancement. And I think that's very real and worth considering, right? So this happens in the morning. Then in the afternoon, and so we coach through it, and she had some ideas on how she was going to create what I'm going to be talking about, which is a win-win situation. And then I had it confirmed in the afternoon when I had already been, leading a book discussion on Allison Fergale's book, Likeable Badass: How Women Get the Success They Deserve. So we'd already had this planned. It was part of my leadership circle that I co-lead, and which is part of Chicago Executives Club. And we had decided to do a book discussion. And of course, we all put our picks in and then we vote on them. And Allison's book won as the book that we wanted to read and discuss. And in another odd synchronicity, I just said, gosh, she spoke at an event. Maybe there's a way that I could find out her information, see if she'd come on and talk about the book. And then by the end of the day, another person in the leadership circle was at another event and got introduced to her. And she just said, hey, would you be willing? And Allison very generously, very kindly said yes. And she came on and we talked about her book and some of the tips that she offers in the book. We asked her some questions. And then I said, I have a particular real life story that just occurred this morning where someone, because part of Allison's book, talks about setting of boundaries, right? And we know that setting boundaries is important and is good. And so, on face value, might look at what happened with my client by her just giving a fast yes to someone as her not having a clear sense of, being able to set boundaries. But that's not the whole picture. And so I talked with Allison because in her book, she, as I said, the subtitle is How Women Get the Success They Deserve, but it's really about balancing being warm and being assertive at work. And it's way more than boundary setting. And being good at boundary setting is very important in your career. Women especially need to be, build that muscle. But another piece of the puzzle that I think when you're thinking about boundary setting is this idea of tuning in. I coach on it a lot about really recognizing signals from your body that perhaps you're pushing up against something, a boundary that's being crossed. And so that is a very good strategy around, making sure that before you say yes or before you say no, that your yes is from a place of curiosity or willingness or excitement, not from a place of obligation or protection in this case, that can lead to resentment, right? So, but, saying yes out of the fear of potential career blowback is bigger than boundary settings or following these inner intuitions. They're very much a part of it, but it's more than that. And so I just thought Allison was going to have some really good wisdom for us. And in fact, she did. So I explained the situation and she said, she's not wrong. Your client's not wrong. As much as we'd like to believe that people can graciously take a no and just accept it for face value and not attach anything else to it or make it mean anything else or turn it into, some sort of fallout later. It's not always the case. It's just, unfortunately, sad truth about corporate. It's just not always the case. And a no can lead to, you being seen as a person who isn't a team player or someone that can't be counted on. So not a go-to person, and we certainly don't want that to be part of our identity. So Allison shares a strategy that she uses in this case, which she calls doing the calculus. So you don't have to love math to embrace this particular, technique that she takes. So, because what she says is I'm always like trying to add up the different potentialities of each option, each yes or no, and all of the people that are involved to come to a win-win. So having it add up to a win-win. And she recognizes, for example, that if she has to adjust to other people's schedules, for example, even if it causes her some added work, that sometimes it can be worth it to do that, that could add up to, in the bigger picture, a gain that, is worth the short-term, um, strain or shifting of her schedule in order to do that. And she becomes seen as someone who doesn't get thrown off because of a schedule change, for example. And in her case, because she's an author, she has, you know, companies that are hiring her to speak at their large events. And then she has a speakers bureau, which is like an organization that helps speakers get speaking gigs, right? And she has this relationship that she's also in. So both with the client that's hiring her but that came through the speakers bureau, if more often than not. And then she has, the speaker bureau relationship. And so she understands that if the company makes changes and it requires her to do some acrobats, she'll do that. She'll say yes in these cases sometimes because it adds up to goodwill with the organization. And also the Speakers Bureau sees her as someone who's not a diva, let's say. Speakers can sometimes get that reputation. And so for her, she's playing this long game, and she's seen as someone who, isn't this diva, and is someone that can be seen as that goes the extra mile. And then when she says no, it's like they don't attach any more to it. They just see it as, we know Allison, she doesn't say no unless she means no. So it isn't a reactionary no, but it's a deliberately thought out no. So playing the long game with your boundary setting, it's you need to have boundaries. We've talked about that, but sometimes saying no can come with the consequences. And so ignoring that reality isn't good, but also just saying yes and then having that built up resentment is also not good. And that's where the calculus comes in. So it's not about being someone who always says no if it's going to cause, problems for your schedule, or if it adds an extra layer of work on you. Those aren't necessarily the reasons that you say no. And it's also not about continuing to say yes to everything that comes your way so that you can be seen as this go-to person, because eventually that crosses over into kind of the person that gets all of the low-hanging kind of garbage tasks, and you can be seen from someone who's strategic and says no when they mean no, and says yes when they mean yes, someone that can be counted on, to kind of the doormat. And that is not something that you want. So you want to be honest and intentional about a yes and about a no. So looking at each and asking yourself, for example, what is this going to cost me? What might it create for me? Is this aligned with where I'm going with my career? So there could be a little bit of opportunistic thinking around this decision. But bigger is whether it's a good opportunity for me, whether it requires me to do some of those acrobats. Can I create a win-win for this? Can this add up to a win-win? Because I can tell you that the women that I see successfully navigating this aren't necessarily having I guess I would say the best boundaries. Like they will sometimes say yes to something that requires extra work out of them, but they're doing it intentionally. They understand the trade-offs, right? And that they know that every yes, every no is shaping how they're being seen. It can help or hurt their opportunities. And also that um, the yes and the no creates a sustainable career depending on um, how you use it. So the no can be very appropriate and important to do, but understanding the trade-offs and sort of, you know, doing the calculus, embracing the math, um, and figuring out how can this add up to a win-win for all of us in a, prevents the blowback that my client was trying to avoid, but actually was setting herself up for potentially future problems because the relationship, she wasn't feeling comfortable in being direct in the relationship, being honest about what was happening. She wasn't comfortable in saying no, and she had all this fear about hurting the relationship or impacting her career advancement. And now she has all kinds of resentment, and she's got all kinds of extra workload. And all of this can be avoided if you can do the math, figure out how both sides could win in this. This removes the resentment. Sometimes there's things, just because they asked you for a particular thing, if you can push back a little bit and say, I want to do this, but I'm also, due to some other commitments, finding that that's straining some things. Is there any other solution to this? And it could be the person's like, oh, it doesn't have to be, Tuesday. It could be Thursday. And you're like, oh, well, Thursday's not a problem at all, right? And so again, you're seen as the person who they can come to that is willing to look at ways to make things work, finding solutions, and also not being a doormat and who's filled with resentment because they decided they hated math. So you know what I mean. So this is really, I think, an important topic. Kind of an extension of the ongoing conversation about setting clear boundaries, but also understanding that sometimes the boundaries you're setting are set for the wrong reasons. It isn't because it isn't you. I guess it's not fully a boundary, but isn't you saying, yeah, when you say yes to something and push cross one of your boundaries, that you might actually be doing it in a way that is a win-lose, and we want to create the win-win. So that's what I have for you today. And if you have questions about this, if you have something that you want me to address in my LinkedIn Lives, just DM me on LinkedIn, DM me on YouTube and Facebook and Instagram, the other channels I'm going live on. Let me know. Ask me the question. And again, inviting you to the May 8th event, 2026, 12 o'clock Central Time. And, start to think about, wherever you're at in your career, what are the other possibilities that might be there? And then keep that in your back pocket, because you never know when something shifts and all of a sudden this new way of working becomes more appealing. So that's it. Peace as usual, and really enjoy being here with you. Talk